voice that told you you can't. Every shadow tried to block your chance, but you got dreams, a fire, a plan. It's time to lead, time to stand. Stand tall, no chains can't hold you. Your heart's alive, the truth will show through. No turning back, it's your hour. This is your time to take back your power. Step into your power, don't look away. This is your rise, your brand new day. You're unstoppable, unshakable. Nothing can break your soul today. Step into your power, let the world see the strongest version of you and me. Step into your power, take your space. You're enough, you're bold, you're full of grace.
Good day, everybody. Here we are on episode 5, season 1 of SoulSpectives. It's incredible. I can't believe how fast the time is going by. And today we're going to dive deeper into the topic of vulnerability, about how can we keep saying yes to life even though we've been hurt, even though we've felt, betrayal and things like that. And I want to share how we can do that. But first, I just before coming on air right now, I just decided I think I would like to play. I play the flute for healing, and I have a few CDs and that. And I have the feeling just to ground us into this, because vulnerability is such a sensitive topic and it can activate because we've all been hurt. We've all had pain. We've all had loss. And to survive, we naturally, process just enough to get through the door of life. But often there is, tail ends. And it brings to mind one of my favorite Sanskrit sayings. It says, the elephant got through the door, but the tail got stuck. So when I heard that, I'm like, oh my God, that just describes what happens when we have trauma or loss, and then, we just process enough to get through, but then we get stuck. There's these little pieces, these little tail ends of those experiences. And especially as we're aging, I'm 55, and the older we get, the more unresolved those tail ends are. They become like what we call that emotional backpack that we carry. And there's all these little, different experiences get the different tails wiggling, triggers, right? To be healed, to come to the surface, to be witnessed, and so that we can take back our power, right? The lead song here is Take Your Power Back. I'm not meaning it in some superhero way. I love that song because, like, we have a power to influence our life. We have a power to shift our perceptions in a way that our experiences can help us and can lift us. But it is a very tender journey. It's not it's not like a motivation thing, like, oh, you can take your power back. It's like, no, it's titration. It's step by step by step, where we meet those tail ends when they surface, rather than keeping them, in the exiled corner of parts of our life we don't want to look at or meet because we just don't know how. So it's not a shaming thing. It's like, we don't know how. When we don't know how to meet the tiger, we're not going to go meet the tiger. We need the tools. And so that's what, my desire is to share these tools with you here through the podcast and through all the work that I do. And so to start today, I'm going to invite you to just close your eyes and take a few deep breaths. And I'm going to play my flute. And my flute is kind of like everything I do. I just sort of do it impromptu, right? I'm just tuning into what feels like the energy is moving in this moment. And so please just take a deep breath in for the count of 5. And then exhale for the count of 5. Just create a nice rhythm of in and out. And I just ask you to be very tender and kind with yourself, because again, this is a topic, it's not an easy one. But when we really come to understand the power that vulnerability gives us, then it becomes easier. But to start, I'm going to play the flute, just to soften, just to land you in the moment, and to create a space to be able to share everything I'm sharing. Okay? So take some deep breaths, and here we go. Take a nice deep breath with that. And I know the flute can stir a lot of feelings in the heart. The first time I heard the flute, it just jumped into my soul. And then I just knew I had to learn. And then I think I already shared that. Yeah, I shared that in one of the episodes already. And it just became my voice for processing a lot of the stuff that I experienced that was really hard. So take a deep breath, and I just invite you to reflect on exploring the possibility, that vulnerability, as I mentioned last week, is one of the fundamental conditions of being fully alive. It has absolutely nothing to do with weakness. It has nothing to do with exposing ourselves to danger. It has nothing to do with recklessness. It's actually a foundational condition to feel and live fully alive. It's about being open to the moment, to truth, while remaining in relationship with ourselves. And a big part of why we are afraid of vulnerability is because what I've observed is our relationship to self is wanting. We're needing to develop a deeper relationship to ourself, to know ourselves, to learn our biology, to learn our patterns, to know our habits, to understand the connections of why we are how we are. Because we all started out vulnerable, open, just wanting to extend love and receive love and play. And we couldn't wait to get up in the morning. We hated going to bed because there was so much exploration. And yes, of course, we were running most on our right side brain, which is the creative abstract, until we're about 7 years old. And then we start shifting to the left brain for more reasoning and rationale. But what I have observed is that our world sort of focuses on overdeveloping the left brain and underutilizing and underdeveloping our right brain, our creativity. And I used to teach at a Waldorf school in Germany, and Waldorf, the whole method of that school was to develop a balanced brain where our left brain is strengthened simultaneously with our right brain. And it's a very beautiful way to understand life. And for me, in my own struggles too, it was like, okay, sometimes I was just too caught in the mind and the stories and needing to dive deeper into the creativity. And that's why the flute was such a medicine for me, because it made me get out of my mind that could spiral me in places that I really didn't want to be. But at that time, I didn't have control of my thinking. I didn't have the mastery that I have now, but playing the flute is what helped me to do that. So we explored last week that, vulnerability and curiosity, I use the metaphor as like the swing dance of the soul, right? Vulnerability says, I don't know what happens next, but I'm willing to remain open. And then curiosity says, okay, let's see, let's explore, let's discover, right? And the moment our life stopped becoming a discovery like it was when we were a child, that's when we kind of got locked in to beliefs, stories, misunderstandings of our own child self, because we didn't know how to process the experiences we were living in our world. Like for me, I'll touch into this later. My mother left when I was 7. And, I knew it impacted me, but I had no idea just how much it had impacted me. And it wasn't until I was ready to really meet that full pain that I was able to move it. Right. So, but we spend so much time of our life avoiding feeling pain and avoiding the discomfort of change that we entrap ourselves. And we wonder why we don't feel alive. We wonder why life doesn't feel joyful anymore. It's because we've created a comfort of certainty around us based on what we think we know. And vulnerability is basically saying, I'm willing to step out of that comfort zone to realize that there may be more that I don't see and understand here. There may be something else for me that I can discover and I can explore to expand my life rather than shrinking it down, right? So when we get hurt, right? When we've experienced heartbreak, betrayal, sorry, I got something in my eye, rejection, disappointment. Oh, I got a little eyelash just dropped in my eye. Failure. Oh, there we go. I think I got it. Or loss, you know, these experiences, they give us understandable reasons to say, man, life sucks. And to feel like, man, I don't know how to be, or I don't want to be, right? And I've been at those thresholds, so I know those dark spaces of feeling so lost and so confused by what my experience was, of life, until I found my navigation through those darker spaces, which is now why I do what I do, because I want to, give what I can so other people can find their way. You can find your way through those dark spaces that are human, they're inevitable. They happen because we live in this world of contrast and duality, and things happen. But just because things happen doesn't mean that life is bad or lacking of meaning. That depends on us, the meaning that we attribute to something. Like I was saying in one of the other episodes, they've discovered that trauma is not solely what happened. Oh my God, this is so funny here. It's not solely what happened to us, but it's the impact. So when there is enough love around a situation, we integrate it, we metabolize it with greater ease, and then it doesn't leave that kind of a strong imprint in our body. But if we don't have the support, if we don't have the understanding, we don't have the guidance, then naturally we are not going to be able to metabolize it. So that's when it becomes this exiled feeling and emotion inside us, and we're afraid to touch it because it was so painful when it happened. So healing requires us to meet the pain that caused us to shut down in the first place, right? Being vulnerable means we have to meet that, and without the tools we don't want to, and that's understandable, right? So how can we keep saying yes to life when life seems to have given us every reason to say no? And I'm sure everybody here watching can agree that, you've had experiences and you've already made it through many because you're here, right? So you've got evidence you can make it through. But there's so much going on in the world too, and it's like, well, what is life? What am I? Who am I? Why am I here? What is this about? And that can create a fear, or it can create, again, the openness of curiosity and discovery. So we have two ways we can go with that. And so I'm going to invite you to take a deep breath. I'm going to invite you to go the path of discovery, because fear is always a false messenger anyways, unless it's the two fears that we're born with, fear of falling and the fear of a loud sound. So other than that, they're all learned and they're programmed. And so when we choose the path of discovery over fear and curiosity, we come back alive. And again, that takes vulnerability. So that's why it's our superpower when we understand it properly, right? So, and one of the reasons it becomes so difficult to open again is that we make what happened something that it means something about us. So we personalize it. If somebody rejects us, we interpret, I'm not enough. If somebody betrays us, we say, I wasn't worth choosing. I'm not worthy. When something fails, I'm a failure. I'm not capable. I've had all of those, by the way, that I've worked through. And when someone closes their heart to us, then we interpret, there must be something wrong with me. So take a deep breath and just do a brief scanning inventory. Which one of these relates to you the most? Which one sort of peaks the most in your body when you hear it? And just be gentle and loving and kind with yourself, and take some deep breaths, because the breath is the medicine. If you notice, whenever you feel a trigger or a pain, you hold your breath. Everything contracts and tightens. And that's how that energy gets locked in our biology. It's not just a metaphor, it gets locked in the muscles and the fascia, it gets locked in the body. And so when we take a deep breath, we expand that space and we sort of counteract that impact. So if you take some deep breaths here, wherever anything might be, moving and stirring, the breath will help you ride it through, like surfing, yeah, I'm just thinking of this right now. The breath is like the surfboard. We talk about surfing through the waves of life. Well, your breath is the surfboard upon which you can surf the waves, right? It just came to me. That's really cute. I like that. Yeah, so this is what we need. We need to have metaphors, ideas, understandings to meet those waves and those moments in a way that also brings in a bit of an element of play. Because when we're playful and curious, then we learn faster than when we're dreading doing something, right? So the thing is that those beliefs that arise because somebody did something to us or didn't do what we thought they should do, or something didn't work out, you know, those those actions from those people, that's from their own inner world. It has nothing to do with you or me. It's their history, their wounds, their fears, their beliefs, their capacity, their choices, and the level of awareness that they are operating from, the capacity they have to meet their own self, not just you. And it's exactly the same for us. It goes both ways. We can only meet somebody to the capacity we've met ourselves. And so sometimes we meet in one place, but then one person grows in another way, and then there's no more meeting place, and that can happen. And then if we don't understand that mechanism, then we take it personal, right? Or it served its learning purpose for us, right? So often the people who hurt us most, they're operating from those kind of places inside themselves that are remaining unresolved and unhealed. So understanding that is not about excusing the harmful behavior. Accountability and discernment still matter. It always matters. And we most often will not receive what we need from the person who harmed us, right? So that's why we have to step up in our own relationship to ourselves. And so understanding this, again, it doesn't excuse it, but it frees us from turning another person's behavior and patterns and, actions into evidence of our worth. That is the key. To see that somebody else's actions are not a measure of my worth or my value, if I'm lovable or enough or capable. Take a deep breath with that. And that's where we get stuck. That's the snag that we get hooked into. We translate it. The meaning we give it is it means there's something wrong with me. And I had that one for most of my life. I had this idea that there was something fundamentally flawed in me, that my mother left, and that all the different traumas that happened after that. But that wasn't the true belief. And it took me many, many years to actually get to that root. I healed many of the layers around that root. I got deep, but it wasn't until I got that root that something actually finally shifted. And that takes time. So healing is a process. It's a journey. It's a pilgrimage. It's not a one and done thing. And it's important to have that understanding when we're on a healing journey. And healing actually means to integrate and to restore to wholeness, which is what the journey is when we are alive. We're constantly integrating and processing and metabolizing and recreating, letting go, creating new. That's the movement of life. And when we're stuck in the stories of the past, it's not to devalue the stories, but we're not supposed to stay stuck in them. We're designed to recreate ourselves from them, to know ourselves from them, right? So if it's somebody else's behavior and it's not my worth, even that knowledge doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact. So I'm not negating the impact it has, right? The impact happens with me and it belongs to my experience. But the behavior tells me about them, and it's important to have that discernment. That's my experience to explore. What happened in me? Where did I go with that? I'm going to give you an example of one of my experiences in a little bit to show you like how that moves, how that comes to be. And this is where vulnerability becomes very, very, very interesting, because remaining open means being willing to feel what the experience actually awakens in us in the moment. Take a deep breath with that. So I'm going to share my little story now. And it's a relatable story because it's about heartbreak, and we've all had heartbreak. So that's a universal experience we can all connect to, and in our mutual humanity and in our mutual confusions and questionings around what happens, right, when things fall apart. So it was about 13 and a half years ago. I met this guy, and it was the first man that I had let myself open to in a very, very long time. And there was, the joy, there was the happiness, there was lots of good feelings. And it seemed like, and he also expressed, he loved me and all kinds of stuff. But then from one day to the next, he became like a steel rod, and he just like shut his heart down. And I was just so confused. It put such shock in my body. I'm like, wait a minute, what happened? And I said to him, I said, can I put my professional cap on for a second? You might have some unresolved, relationship stuff coming up. He's like, nope, nope. I just gotta go. I'm like, oh, okay. So I was in my shocks, like, whoa, what happened? It was the first time I'd opened in a long, long time. And so I decided to sit with my pain because I already had learned how to do that. I already had learned to meet my emotions, to let them, to feel them, but be the observer of them as well, and the inquirer, have an inquiring mind. What's happening, right? And I could feel this pain, and it was a relatively short connection relationship. I think it was just like a month, but my body was experiencing it so deeply, and I'm like, wow, what else is here? Let me have a look. And I allowed myself to feel it completely. I cried. I witnessed my body. I breathed through the process. And this is what helped me get through. You got to breathe through these moments. You got to not hold your breath. You got to breathe. So when I breathed through those moments, and I went deeper than just the surface story, and underneath the heartbreak, I found something so much older, and it was the abandonment of my mother when I was 7. And I remembered the first time in my life, I remembered being the little girl. I remembered the dress I was wearing, my shoes, I remembered my hair, and I remember watching her walk out the door. And I was standing there confused. And I knew she wasn't coming back somehow. And then, you know, after that, it was just like, so my own stories were like, what's wrong with me? It's my fault. And then shortly thereafter, there was a situation where my sister had an accident, and she was in a coma for almost a half a year. And, this 6 months after my mom left. So then that compounded that, even though, of course, it's not my fault, but was different with me afterwards. So then I felt rejection there too. So my foundational point was rejection. And then when I went to school, I was rejected by kids. I was bullied because now suddenly I had a cripple for a sister. That's what they said. She was able to walk again and do many things again after. But so that whole nugget of layered pain that happened in such a short period of time, through that experience that got activated, through this person just becoming like hard, cold, nothing, it activated and cracked that open inside of me so that I could see the original wound behind the rejection I was feeling. And it made so much sense. And I could see how that experience is like, if you have like one centerpiece, you got all these different pathways, right? So it like that pain like activated like every single pathway of rejection and pain that I'd ever had in my life. So that's why it was so intense. But it was a healing. And because I already understood that, I could use it that way. Now, had I met that pain a few years before, I wouldn't have been able to go there. It would have broken me. But because I did lots of layered healing work and inner inquiry and restoration of my own self, I was able to meet that hardcore pain. It's not something we can do right away. We heal in layers. So just to give that, understanding, we only can meet what we're ready to meet. And that's beautiful. That's how our body and our nervous system is protecting us. So that's why it's important to not force healing, but to engage the moments when there's triggers and emotions that are being activated, because those are the doorways in. I always say our triggers are the doorways to our soul, because our soul is buried underneath these buried pains. And the only way we gain access is when we're activated, when something in our environment catalyzes an activation. So take a deep breath with that. That's why this part of vulnerability can be frightening, because when we're vulnerable, we're open. And when we're open, we have to feel what we really feel. So something today can touch something unresolved from yesterday. And it's important to just understand that, and to understand that for our nervous system, this is something that is so essential to know. Something could have happened 25 years ago, but if your nervous system has not had the opportunity to metabolize, unwind, integrate, and restore, then your nervous system is still living in 20 years ago. That's why when a trigger happens, we can suddenly feel like we're right in it again and it feels like no time passed, because our nervous system lives in a different time zone than our mind, right? And our body in terms of our physical, our skeletal system and everything. But our nervous system lives in a different time zone. It lives in the perpetual now, and it lives in all the unfinished experiences that still hold an impact in our biology and our relationship to ourselves. So after I realized that, I started breathing, my tears softened, but I still felt a sadness in me. And I was like, okay, well, what else is there? Right? What else am I missing? There's something more, because I could feel that release, although it was huge, there was still another tail end in this experience. And then after recognizing that abandonment layer and feeling that, I was going deep inside, like, okay, so what am I really missing? What am I missing about him? And then I I realized that I wasn't missing him at all. Realized I was missing how I experienced myself when I was with him. I had become open, expansive, joyful, loving, playful, alive. And I suddenly realized in that moment, and it was like literally like an aha moment, just shifted a second. It was very, very powerful. And then I realized that experience was happening in me. So it's mine. It's my experience, and he certainly was a catalyst for it. Relationships influence us. That's what they're supposed to do, right? We awaken things in each other all the time, right? That's the whole purpose of relationship. We're mirrors. We're mirrors of our love. We're mirrors of our best self, and we're mirrors of our, unconscious self as well. Right? So he had brought a catalyst into my world that brought me into connection with that part of me. And in the love that I was feeling, and the openness and the expansion, it was me experiencing me, not him. And that was so huge. So that aha, it just shifted my whole biology. And I've never gone back to, in any situation, to feeling dependent on somebody else for my happiness and my joy. And that's the key. So instead of closing my heart and becoming bitter, I actually was open and expanded, because I gained new earth in my body and my soul again that I'd been disconnected from. I gained insight, I gained understanding, I gained better navigation in my own inner world. And because of that, I was open to meet the love of my life, but I'd actually already I'd made a statement to myself, like, okay, I'm okay to be alone if that's okay. But I said, universe, if there's somebody I can share my soul with, then bring him now. I would love to have somebody to share my life with. And then 3 months later, I met my husband. We've been together for 13 years now, and we've been walking that mirror journey. And many times there's been collapses, but then we've both been committed to being vulnerable, to go deeper, to understand whatever our triggers were, when we unintentionally cause each other pain or confusion or things like that. So we have that living relationship. And this is what is possible when we let ourselves be vulnerable. Take a deep breath with that. When we let ourselves be responsible for our own happiness, instead of putting that weight on somebody else, because it's not their responsibility. We're here to meet at intersections of love and growth. That's what one of my Kahuna elders said. And I love that. If we're here to meet at intersections of love and growth, that means we're not here to tell anybody who they should be and shouldn't be. That means we're not here to shut down somebody because we don't like something, right? We need to find our way to communicate, to love first ourselves, And then to find somebody that loves their self enough and knows themselves enough that we can actually embark on this journey of self-discovery together. And then that's what keeps the relationship so juicy and alive, because we're always learning and we're always discovering, because as long as we're alive, there's stuff. There's stuff that will come up, and there's new parts of us to encounter at different levels and layers. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's painful at times. Of course, there's confusions, there's challenges, but again, when we have a map to understand the path of vulnerability and the power it gives us, first within ourselves and then in our connections, then things change, right? And so the difference when I met my husband versus when I met anybody before him was there was a part of me that was looking for the other person to validate me, to tell me I'm worthy. And that's why I kept attracting people that couldn't do that, because that was on me. That's my thing to do. I needed to do that first. So take a deep breath with that. And so from this experience, what that taught me is that vulnerability is not a gift to somebody. Like we have the expression, I'm not going to open again because it hurt too much, or I don't want to be used or manipulated, or I don't want to feel that pain again, right? So this is why we don't let ourselves be vulnerable. But we're actually, we're removing our dance ticket to the swing dance of the soul party of life. We're removing ourselves from living when we do that. And for me, I came to understand that when I open my heart to somebody or an experience or a possibility, that's a gift to myself first. I am giving myself the opening to come alive. I am willing to meet life in the moment, open, versus through my filters and my stories. And I touched into that last week as well, right? So when I open my heart, I experience openness. When I open my heart to love, I experience love. When I open myself to feel joy, I experience joy. And when I participate fully, I experience my own aliveness. And so that's what vulnerability is. It's the power of being fully alive, being able to engage the moment. And of course, I hope that another person can meet me there. Unfortunately, my husband meets me there. And then that's the beauty of relationship. That's the beauty of connection. It's not to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Utilitarian, right? A lot of the ideas of relationship, it's utilitarian. You need to fulfill these for me to be happy. And you need to do this for me to be happy, or for me to love you. There's so many conditions. And of course, we want to be in like resonance with our partner, for sure. But it shouldn't be based on that. That doesn't work. And it will never work. And that's why we keep repeating the same stories again and again until we come home to ourselves and we discover ourselves, and we learn how to let ourselves open, because this is what it is to be alive, not based on if I'm going to succeed if I try this or not. We don't know. We never know at the beginning, right? So take a deep breath with that and maybe reflect a little bit, because we've all been taught the same program. All the Hollywood movies show it too, you fulfill me, you complete me, but they don't say what that actually means. And the only two people that can complete each other are people who are already complete in themselves. And then they create a whole new realm of completion. That's the juice right there. When two people can come together and bring their own happiness, their own curiosity, their creativity, and their aliveness, and they share it. And that's the completion. That's that energy. Not you fulfill everything on my list. Sorry, that don't work. And it will lead to a perpetual path of suffering. It doesn't work. So with all of this understanding, it came clear to me that vulnerability ultimately comes down to being in relationship with self, in self-trust and self-knowing. So vulnerability is about self-trust. Self-trust doesn't mean that nothing painful will happen. It doesn't mean that no one will disappoint me. It doesn't mean that everything will work out exactly as I hope or I plan. Self-trust means whatever life brings me, I trust that I will not abandon myself, that I can and I will meet it, that I will feel it, that I can listen to myself within it, that I can learn from it, that I can respond, and then that I will always find my way home again. In my 20s, I created a mantra for myself and I said, no matter what happens, I will learn and I will grow. And that commandment that I gave myself, I've stuck with it. And because I've stuck with that, whenever fears or doubts come in about should I did it, this is the right choice, should I have done that or shouldn't I have done that or whatever, it's like, no, it doesn't matter what I choose. Everything is going to lead me to a path of learning and growing. Some of the paths are harder, some of them are easier. But when I commit to that, no matter what happens, I'm going to learn and grow, then that is what's going to happen. And I can count on that. And I don't have to let the fear, the natural fears and doubts that will arise, it's a part of it. They're going to be there. They're going to be knocking on our door for the rest of our life. But we got to know what their place is and turn the volume down and, tune into ourselves, build that self-trust so that those voices no longer have power. Right? So take a deep breath. So when we understand, ourselves this way, for me, understanding myself that way, then vulnerability, it became less frightening. It actually became more exciting. It became like, wow, let's go check this out. And I remember a line in one of my favorite movies, Love Actually, where the father was talking with the son had a crush and on a girl, and then he felt heartbroken and then had to talk with his father, and then the talk led to them both saying, okay, let's go get the padooties kicked out of us by love, right? They're like, okay, let's go meet it, right? And that's the energy of aliveness, being willing to fall, being willing to be hurt even, but understanding that no matter what happens, there's always learning, there's always growing, and through that there comes meaningfulness that gives our life purpose and gives us something, gives us the beauty of life, connects us to the beauty of life, right? Because we can, the only relationship we can be certain of is really the relationship with ourselves. So take a deep breath with that. When we can establish that confidence and that certainty within our own self, we make that commitment, no matter what, I'm going to learn and going to grow. There is a pathway through this. Then possibilities open because we're choosing possibility versus impossibility. I wrote a chapter in Cracking the Rich Code. It was endorsed by Tony Robbins, was pretty cool. And it's called The Power and Possibility of You. And basically vulnerability, I'm talking about vulnerability in that chapter too. We need to be vulnerable in order to open our possibilities. We can't be closed off and have dreams, but not open ourselves to have life move through us, right? So one of the things, we're coming close to the end of the show right now, and I wanted to bring this little piece into, because it makes sense, and not just in relationship, anywhere in life, right? There's a beautiful saying, people, I'll also say situations, come into our lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. That crossed my path in my early 30s. And I actually wrote a nice little writing around that somewhere. I've got to find that. So when we first meet someone, or we first have an idea or endeavor to make, like an entrepreneur, a business, for me, that's my life too, stepping out into the vulnerability to do that, right? We never know how it's going to work out. We don't know if it's a season, a reason, or a lifetime. We don't know. That's the mystery, and that's the beauty. That's the discovery. That's actually the biggest part of the joy. Because wonder requires uncertainty. Awe requires uncertainty. Adventure requires uncertainty. Discovery requires uncertainty. Love requires uncertainty. Creativity requires uncertainty. Trust requires uncertainty. Growth requires uncertainty. Faith, possibility, all of these require uncertainty to come into movement and to engage life. Just imagine if we knew every outcome before we began. Wouldn't that be like boring? Can you imagine if you knew every single conversation you're going to have, every meal you're going to have, you knew every single thing, for the rest of your life? I mean, okay, what is that? So one of my invitations is also to embrace the mystery in life, and that requires vulnerability as well. And the vulnerability and the not knowing are what brings aliveness, right? It's knowing that brings stagnation when we think we know and we don't realize we don't know what we don't know. That creates stagnation. So take a deep breath. We don't need to know everything to take that first step. And what we need to know only shows up when we take that first step, when we explore. We just need enough relationship with ourselves to participate in what we don't yet know. So here we are at SoulSpective of the week. I really like doing this. This is fun. So this week, I'm going to invite you to notice one place where an experience from your past may have taught you to close something in you, a dream, a feeling, an experience of your own true self, love, creativity, friendship, trust, new beginnings, being seen, trying again. And it's not about trying to force yourself to open, but just be curious and inquire. What am I protecting? What's behind that wall? What did I make that experience mean about me? Because that's what you're the author of. You're not the author of the other person and what they did or didn't do. You're the author of the meaning that you give the experience. And what did you make it mean about you? Explore that and let it go, because it's not going to be true. What might become possible if you knew you could trust yourself to remain with yourself no matter what happens? What becomes possible? It's different. That's the power of vulnerability. And then ask yourself, what might life be inviting you to say yes to again? Not recklessly, not without discernment, but with enough self-trust to remain available to what you haven't experienced yet. So you can let yourself be surprised by life, be surprised by yourself, be surprised by the mystery. And again, we can't know whether something will be for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. But we can know that if we have that self-trust to stay present, we will be present and we will be able to bring ourselves through whatever it is that experience brings us, right? We don't know where the next yes will lead. And we're not supposed to. We're just supposed to follow the yes of this moment and know that if there's a strong yes, it's leading me somewhere. And then I just got to follow the breadcrumbs, follow the leads that it gives me, right? Because life isn't asking us to predict it. That's not what we're here for. We're being asked to participate in life, and vulnerability is the only way we can fully participate. So again, we are done for today. As always, stay curious, stay compassionate with yourself, and stay in relationship and connection with yourself. I end the show with that, just to anchor that in, because that's really ultimately what it's all about, and to remain available to possibility. That's a new one I'm adding today. Bless your week, meet the moments, and I'll see you next week. Thanks so much for being with me here, and like and subscribe. I got to get in the habit of doing that. Please like and subscribe if you feel like this show gave you something of value and worth. Then that helps it to circulate further in the world to reach more people. Okay, thanks so much. Cheers. Bye.
Step into your power, feel it rise. No more hiding, no more compromise. You're the light, you're the spark, burning bright. This is your moment, this is your life.